From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jody Guerrero. Tonight we take a look back at the top stories from our Borderlands team, from the issue of missing indigenous women to a cross-border sewage issue impacting Nogales, Arizona.
According to a report published by the Urban Indian Health Institute, Arizona is the third most dangerous state for Native American women in the country.
That's why legislators and advocates are coming together to push forward a bill that, if signed into law, would create a first-of-its-kind task force in our state, combating the high numbers of murdered and missing indigenous women. Cronkite News reporter Hattie Meyer has more.
In a unanimous vote, House Bill 2570 passed, sending it now for a vote in the Senate.
There was no nays, it was all A's. To see the women come out and to see how emotional and to know that they back this, and I know they know of other people in their lives, mothers, sisters, daughters, that have happened to them.
Dottie Lizer, the second lady of the Navajo Nation, can't help but choke up as she recalls the murder of her close friend's sister, Patricia Platero.
She was 49 years old. She's from Tojajale, New Mexico. She went missing in 2015, and her body was found on the west side of Albuquerque on July 2nd, 2015, and her case is still unsolved.
Lizer was one of dozens of indigenous women dressed in red who filled the gallery overlooking the House of Representatives supporting House Bill 2570. The goal is to have access to more information that can help bring down the alarming rates in which indigenous women are murdered, abused, or assaulted.
HB 2570 will create a committee to look at the problem of missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. It's a committee that will be made up of law enforcement agencies from both the urban and rural Arizona-based agencies, as well as the 22 tribal nations.
Native women experience violent crime at an incredibly high rate, and most of their cases end up sitting in folders as cold cases. Part of this is due to a lack of jurisdiction and no crossover between Native and non-Native law enforcement.
The tribal nations are sovereign nations, so our rural county sheriffs and law enforcement don't have jurisdiction within the tribal nations, and the tribal nations law enforcement doesn't have jurisdiction outside of the tribal nations.
Although they know there are still challenges ahead, advocates say the passing of this bill is a step in the right direction in fighting violence against Native American women, and they know they can't do it alone.
They're acknowledging the problem. They're looking to partner with our indigenous communities to solve this problem.
Hattie Meyer, Cronkite News.
State legislators in other states like New Mexico, Nebraska, and Minnesota are also reviewing bills that would create committees, such as the one that is being proposed here in Arizona.
Immigration officials continue to drop off migrants at a Phoenix Greyhound bus station and churches across the valley.
Cronkite News reporter Walter Panate visited a church in Tolleson where they want to continue to help, but it isn't easy.
These migrants spend about a day or two in the church while arrangements are made for them. With the increase of families being dropped off, the amount of supplies that people are donating just isn't enough.
It's a crisis. It's a crisis. We need help. I mean, we do this with all of our heart.
It's been a labor of love and faith for Pastor Raul Salgado as Revolution Church in Tolleson continues to open its doors to the steady stream of migrant families dropped off by immigration and custom enforcement officials. But the desire to help has come at a cost.
It looks like it's just getting bigger and bigger. The numbers when we started back in November, December, we started off with 50 a day. Now we're up to like 100 a day, so they've just been going up higher and higher.
These migrant families are being dropped off by ICE after they've petitioned for asylum and been processed. ICE has been releasing waves of them since late last year, arguing they simply do not have enough facilities to house them. One of them, Ismael Dominguez, crossed into the U.S. coming from Guatemala.
In Mexico, immigration stopped us, and they took our money. We put all our money together to be able to give to them, and they let us pass.
That's where organizations like Revolution Church step in, but the constant influx of family is stretching many of these aid groups thin.
We have to provide 3 meals. Sometimes we provide 2. People are hungry. They're hungry. They want to eat everything that you put there on the table, especially children.
Salgado says churches are struggling financially. With more families arriving, the church's monthly expenses have doubled. Other churches, he points out, haven't had any other choice but to stop helping the migrants. When churches can't host families, ICE drops them off at this Greyhound bus station near Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. The concern is that these people won't know what to do when they get left here.
They have to sleep there. They have to call the police. And these people, they don't know nothing about it. It's another system, another government system. It's another country, another language.
My goal is to work and maintain an establishment for my family.
In any way, shape, or form that we could receive some help, that would be awesome. And we could continue to not only help the people we're hosting, but help the government, you could say that way, because it's the government who's bringing them out to us, to the churches.
Both pastors are now receiving migrant families multiple times a week. They say they hope state officials will soon step in to help with what they call a crisis. In the Broadcast Center, Walter Penate, Cronkite News.
Here in Arizona, members of the Venezuelan immigrant community took the opportunity to let their voices be heard as well. This after an anti-war group based in Tucson held a demonstration advocating for the U.S. not to meddle in the Venezuelan conflict.
Hands off! Venezuela! Libertad! Libertad! It's like if you have a neighbor and you see your neighbor being abused, or, what do you do?
For Ricardo Hines, that's the question he and other Venezuelans supporting humanitarian aid for his country are asking.
Sí se puede!
He was one of dozens of demonstrators rallying Saturday in Tucson's Armory Park, where both sides of the Venezuelan conflict came face to face. A presidential tug-of-war between Nicolás Maduro and Juan Guaidó has left Venezuela in the midst of intense social and political turmoil.
20 years of misery.
Here in Arizona, as one side claims the country lacks food and basic medicine, the other stands firm on Maduro's side, arguing aid is not needed.
There's not a shortage of food. There's a shortage of money because of the hyperinflation. And all of this is a political and economic weapon to make the Maduro government look ineffective, look brutal.
Others, though, disagree.
So our jobs is to try to explain as best as possible to those who haven't lived it, who haven't left their families, who haven't witnessed this misery.
Aside from the Venezuelans that came here to advocate about humanitarian aid into their country, the opposite group, Tucson Anti-War Committee, also came out here to share their message.
Let's take care of the problems here at home first. For the counter demonstrators here that want the aid to come in, the better demand is to get the United States to lift the sanctions.
Isabel Garcia, a Mexican immigrant rights activist,
And we have to resist.
also says she wants Venezuela to come out of this situation without the help of the U.S.
Yes, do I want Venezuelan people to have medicines and food? Absolutely. But I want the United States out of it.
But for Venezuelans like Hines, they see U.S. aid and support as one of the last lifelines for his country as it lives day after day in chaos.
It's just that there is no medication, people are dying, kids are, starving, kids are eating from the trash cans.
Organizers of the Tucson Anti-War Committee also presented a letter to the Office of the U.S. State Department in Tucson demanding for the United States to not get involved in the Venezuelan conflict. Members of the Venezuelan community in Arizona say they plan on continuing advocating for a political and social change in their home country.
As security on the southern border continues to create national headlines and controversy, one border community says their big worry is actually something else. Reporter Austin Westfall is live in the broadcast center with what Nogales officials are calling their actual crisis. Austin?
Yeah, Nogales, Arizona and the communities around it are facing a problem. Sewage from Mexico contaminating the water that flows through their area. The question now is, how are these two towns on both sides of the border going to find common ground to tackle this complicated issue?
If you want to talk about a crisis that we have in this community, that is our crisis. Why is Mexico sending us their raw sewage on an overflow? Why?
Why and until when?
Those are the two main questions that Nogales, Arizona City Council member Marcelino Verona is asking, unable to hide his anger about the quality of the water flowing through his city. In late January, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality confirmed that water from Mexico containing raw sewage is intermittently contaminating the Nogales Wash, posing potential health risks to the community on the U.S. side.
Why do we have to get all of their crap?
I didn't know that this is what's happening.
This border town is no stranger to reports of the Nogales Wash being dirty. Santa Cruz County saying on its website, wastewater contamination of the Nogales Wash attributable to Mexico as it enters Arizona has been an ongoing issue for over 2 decades. Some, like Elidor Zamorano, who's lived in Nogales all his life, say they've known since childhood not to go near the wash.
They wouldn't let us play in the river because it was contaminated with sewage water from Mexico, they would say.
Some residents here in Nogales tell Cronkite News that kids and pets play in this very wash, even though that's exactly what they're not supposed to do. Juan Rodriguez recently moved to Nogales from California. His granddaughters and dogs have played in the wash.
I don't want them to get sick, so I have to be very careful from now on.
The potential for illness caused by raw sewage is one of the reasons officials are urging the public to avoid the Nogales Wash.
We're a community at risk.
Ben Lamelli is a Rio Rico resident and retired hydrologist who worked with the Department of Interior. He says there are more towns along the border he also worries about.
Whether you're talking the cities of Ambos, Nogales, or all the downstream communities of Rio Rico, Tubac, Carmen, and beyond, we are all a community at risk.
So who is responsible? The problem begins on the other side of the border in Nogales, Sonora. That's where Mexican water company Umapas has water pumps they say they can't afford to fix. Behind this gate are the malfunctioning pumps responsible for sending wastewater containing raw sewage all the way across the border and into the washes around Arizona communities. Umapas would not talk to Cronkite News in person, but did issue a video statement on Facebook.
According to the international treaties, we as an organization have the obligation to cover the costs, which are a really big financial weight for us.
If a pump breaks down, you should have extra pumps there all ready to take one out and put another one in there. Don't make your problems our problems.
They have to fix it because we don't want to get in trouble around here by getting sick.
Now, Umapas did not give a time frame for when they expect the malfunctioning pumps to be fixed. Austin Westfall, Cronkite News.
A museum in the Valley renovated a nearly 20-year-old exhibit showcasing the historical significance of boarding schools to the Native American community.
Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto was able to attend a preview of the event before the exhibit opened to the public.
Native American boarding schools have been a controversial topic for those part of the indigenous community, and right here at the Hearn Museum there's currently a newly renovated exhibit combining context, history, and healing.
I'm seeing classmates and I'm laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen Ray in forever, and there he is.
And it's those faces the very first thing you see when walking into the newly renovated exhibit inside Phoenix's Hearn Museum. It's an interactive and immersive experience going back in time when many Native Americans were sent off to boarding schools across the country starting in 1879 till the 1990s. The idea was to have these indigenous children assimilate into the Euro-American society at the time.
Well, I really think it's a hidden history that a lot of people are not aware of. People drive up and down Indian School Road in Phoenix every day and don't know the association with Phoenix Indian School, which had a 99-year history.
Historical photographs, clothing, and mock dorm rooms serve to show what life was like for these Native students at the schools.
Welcome. Thank you.
Tola Hongva, who went to Phoenix Indian School, says those early boarding school days still bring up heavy emotions for her people.
Whenever a child is separated from their family for an extended period of time, that's trauma.
One of the most impactful pieces on displays is this bright teal hair cutting chair, next to hair and chopped braids scattered on the floor.
The hair was cut, again, because the schools are based on a military model. They didn't respect or understand the purpose of long hair and braids.
Brian Brayboy, who is a special advisor on American Indian Affairs at ASU, agrees Native American boarding schools in the past were controversial and discriminatory. In 2019, he sees the experience as a much more positive one.
For communities who are in rural places, who have schools that aren't easily accessible, boarding schools
today serve a real important purpose.
For Tolahongva, despite the efforts to suppress her ancestral roots, the pride she felt being Native American was simply too big to forget.
Those young kids in those early years continue to speak their languages. They just did it in places where the adults couldn't hear them and get after them. Nothing stays exactly the same for 99 years. Things change.
In Phoenix, Marcela Baedo, Cronkite News. According to the Heard Museum's curator over here, there's currently no end date for the exhibit. Live in downtown Phoenix, Marcela Baedo, Cronkite News.
Maryville is the site of a brand new multi-thousand square foot space dedicated to helping its residents find jobs and acquire new employable skills. Cronkite News reporter John Cardinale was there and tells us what services this new center is offering.
As soon as the opening ribbon was cut, employers and those looking for a job didn't waste time putting this new job resource center in Maryville to use.
I think it's great. I mean, they need, it's a good way to get people hired, a good way to bring somebody on.
The engagement center, located inside Desert Sky Mall, opened its doors recently.
CPLC started in 1969 to confront oppression facing Latinos.
Chicanos por la Causa, the nonprofit organization which focuses on serving the Latino community, is one of the main sponsors of this new initiative.
We have 8,000 square feet in the CPLC Engagement Center. We have 4 classrooms, a tech lounge, some case management rooms where we can meet individually with clients.
Chicanos por la Causa officials say resources like this have been absent from the Maryville community. Their hope is to bring more job opportunities to this historic part of the valley.
We've been working here in the Maryville community for the past 2 years. Governor Ducey identified Maryville and the surrounding communities as an area of high unemployment and need, and he put together a task force led up by Rosalind Boxer at the Office of Economic Opportunity. Long story short, here we are 2 years later. We've helped over 7,330 people find jobs in Maryville alone.
Helping jumpstart the initiative,
My name is Javier Angulo. I'm the Senior Director of Community Relations for Walmart.
Walmart has given roughly $1.5 million towards the new facility and its programs.
So at Walmart, we understand that the retail jobs are changing and new skills are required in order to be competitive in this new retail world.
One great thing about this new facility is that the doors are open to everyone. No matter how old or young you are, there are services here to support you.
We have a program specifically for youth, in particular Opportunity Youth. We have a program dedicated for youth and adults to help them with training. And then we have some program and case managers that can help people of all ages and backgrounds find that job and really find that career that they're looking for.
With what Chicanos por la Causa is doing is giving an opportunity to the low-income families or minorities or even people that just don't know exactly what they want to do with their lives or how to go about doing things with their lives. So it's very helpful.
In Maryville, John Cardinale, Cronkite News.
Advocates for Chicanos por la Causa said their target is to positively affect 10,000 individuals each year through this new center.
According to the American Foundation for the Blind, nearly 21 million people are considered blind or visually impaired in the United States. More than 100,000 of those live right here in Arizona. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Baedo had the chance to see how blind immigrants are learning the English language through a unique program. Marcela?
We were there as this statewide nonprofit organization put on what they call a Culture Day, an initiative that provides services to blind immigrants, showcasing their one-of-a-kind ESL program, teaching students how to speak English. Close your eyes and now imagine attempting to learn a foreign language without being able to see what you're being taught. For blind people, that is their reality. Now imagine being blind, an immigrant, and trying to learn a language that is not your own. Savvy Services for the Blind provides a unique English as a second language program that's helping immigrant students in Arizona not only learn the language, but land jobs once they graduate.
Very often it happens that in their country of origin they do not receive any training for the blind people.
Due to that lack of training, the nonprofit decided to implement a non-visual English as a second language program.
I use these to teach sentence structure or part of the speech, and that will be subject and the verb and maybe a complement, and we will practice. I am Joanna.
Here at Savvy, ESL instructors will use items and props like this dollhouse to teach their students English. They'll also even use things like a mouth to properly teach how to pronounce specific English words.
We show the tongue in between the teeth.
Maricela Gradias, a Mexico native, has spent 4 years in the program, and she's hoping to finally start her career soon, speaking the English she's learned.
With this class, ESL class, have more opportunities in the plan of in the future. For example, in my goal is massage therapy.
We usher in that independence so that when they do step out into the real world, they're not a liability to anyone. We can get them to gainful employment where they're living a quality of life that is pleasing to them.
According to the American Foundation for the Blind, with over 173,000 visually impaired Arizonans, an organization like Savvy is hoping to reach more students so that they all know.
It's not what you can see, but it's what you can do.
Aside from their Phoenix location, Savvy has 2 more campuses, one in Tucson, the other in Yuma. They currently serve about 100 to 130 students for free across all their locations. In the Broadcast Center, Marcela Bayeto, Cronkite News.
The International Rescue Committee provides opportunities for refugees, asylees, victims of human trafficking, survivors of torture, and other immigrants to thrive in the United States. Here in Phoenix, the IRC is looking for new ways to raise funds to help refugees as they resettle in the valley. Cronkite News reporter Hattie Meyer shows us one fashionable way they're doing just that.
I just want to be a fashion designer. Still, I'm working on it.
Noreen Amir has loved fashion since before she could use a needle and thread.
I was always sit beside my mother and ask her to just make some design for me.
That was in her home country of Pakistan, a place she and her family fled last year because of difficult circumstances. With the help of the International Rescue Committee, Amir and 9 of her relatives are in the process of resettling in Phoenix. Over the weekend, Amir debuted her collection at the IRC Haute Couture fashion show in Monorchid near downtown Phoenix. She was one of 5 refugee designers, the others coming from Burundi, Honduras, Afghanistan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The IRC's Stanford Prescott says Haute Couture is about more than just putting clothes on a runway.
What we're trying to show here is that refugees bring art, they bring culture, they bring economic success to our valley, and that's something that should be celebrated, not something that should be.
According to the IRC, the number of refugees admitted into the United States from countries such as Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and Kenya dropped dramatically between 2017 and 2018. In Arizona, only 230 refugees were resettled between October 1st of last year and January 31st. Although this number may sound small, it's actually more than in other U.S. locations.
Arizona is actually one of the highest states for refugee resettlement. When refugees first arrive, we provide a lot of services targeted at self-sufficiency and integration.
Malia Shankuru modeled for 3 of the designers. Her family is Ethiopian, coming to the U.S. when she was 18.
It's not just about, presenting the nice clothing and just being a part of this event, but it's also, again, giving back and showing the other designers who are from foreign countries and they brought it here and sharing their culture and their design. Definitely beautiful to be a part of it.
Maddie Meyer, Cronkite News.
And refugee advocates say not enough is being done to save those fleeing their countries.
Several organizations recently came together hoping to bring awareness to the issue by having participants walk a mile in a refugee's shoes. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto went to southern Arizona for the event.
Separated our family. I had a reaction. I was starting to feel kind of anxious.
That's how Mary Butler felt after her 5 boys were separated from her during this mock exercise in Tucson. It was a part of the Walk a Mile in a Refugee's Shoe simulation taking place on U of A's campus. The experience taking participants through a 7-stage simulation process to hopefully better understand the journey refugees go through during their resettlement process.
The Where Are the Refugees campaign, we're really trying to continue to put pressure on our legislators and bring awareness to the community that we welcome refugees.
Stations included things like shelter, border crossing, education, and medical.
Unfortunately, we're running really low on medication.
All attempting to shed light on what refugees really go through.
Another one of the stations is this water simulation, where participants can understand what it's like for refugees to collect their water at these refugee camps. Now, I wanted to try it out for myself.
Participants walking along the entire perimeter of the event had to carry jugs of water, resembling the trek many refugees do daily.
The average American goes through 100 gallons of water per day per person. Each refugee is only allotted 5 gallons per day.
Former refugees like Jean-Paul and his family agree the simulation was a good way of getting others to understand what they went through when they fled the Congo back in 1996.
People who are in camp, they are suffering. All of them, they seek to come here.
According to Sumik, a former refugee from Bosnia, one of the goals for Walk a Mile in a Refugee's Shoes is to bring awareness to the declining number of refugees allowed into the U.S. because of President Trump's admission cap.
We are 6 months into that federal fiscal year. However, we're not reaching even half of the 30,000 allotted refugees.
As for Arizona, Sumik says the state has resettled over 80,000 refugees in the past few decades, but now they'd be lucky if even just 1,000 are able to be allowed in. For refugee families like Jean-Paul's, coming to the U.S. is what opened the door to a better future.
This event, it is good. We are remembering how we were in refugee camps.
In Tucson, Marcela Baedo, Cronkite News.
According to the Arizona Department of Economic Security, since the 1970s, more than 60,000 refugees have made Arizona home.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.